Good morning, everyone. We will start in a couple of minutes, just giving everyone a chance to join us at 9.
Okay.
All right, very warm welcome. Good morning, and welcome to the Simplify Accounts Payables Automation webinar with the focus on the government, because you will hear from 2 government agencies talking about their journey, and also PEPPOL e-invoicing. However, if you're not one of the government customers, don't worry. I think you'll find plenty of insights today that don't necessarily relate to the government implementation of accounts payables and e-invoicing. Our agenda for today, we will start with an introduction to FUJIFILM and ESCO and the technology that you will be hearing about today, so you understand the context behind it. And then we will start at 9:10. We will start a panel discussion with Lindsay Horton, who is a manager of financial systems at Kāinga, and Mel Patrimonio, who's a group manager, transactional services, health, New Zealand. Both of them will share some really useful insights about implementation of accounts payables automation and their thoughts around e-invoicing as well. We will then start with the live Q&A at 9:40. Please use the Q&A button to ask the questions that you'd like at the top of the screen. You'll find a Q&A, just pop your question in there, and then at 9:40 we will start asking your questions. We will wrap up at 9:55 and finish the webinar at 10 a.m. sharp. So just a couple of, insights about FUJIFILM and process automation. At Process Automation, our mission is to help Kiwi businesses work smarter by improving and automating their financial processes. We partnered with ESCO in 2014 because we recognized their advanced strategy around both cloud and AI back in 2014. And over the last 10 years, we have deployed more than 100 ESCO projects locally here in New Zealand that automated both accounts payables and accounts receivables side of financial processes. So a little bit about our ESCO again and FUJIFILM. We have over 10 years of very strong partnership, and ESCO globally has 6,000 customers. In New Zealand, we have about 100, and ESCO automates about 1 billion transactions every year. Again, in New Zealand, we automate with ESCO a bit more than 3 million transactions annually. ESCO is certified access point for PEPPOL in over 60 countries, and it has been a certified access point for New Zealand and Australia since 2020. We've got a number of customers in New Zealand using ESCO for accounts payables and accounts receivables processes. Many of them are government agencies, but we also have a number of large and small to medium-sized companies using ESCO to automate their financial processes. ESCO as the platform is positioned as the automation for the Office of the CFO because it covers and automates most of the back office financial processes you will find in most organizations. Today, our focus will be on accounts payables on the left-hand side of the ESCO, what we call flowers or petals. And it also covers areas of procurement, contracts management, supplier management, sourcing, and expense management. And on the other side of the equation, we've got order to cash or invoice to cash. So if you're processing orders for B2B customers, then ESCO can help you manage your orders, manage customer inquiries, credit management, collections management, claims and deductions, cash allocation, and also invoice delivery, including PEPPOL. The platform is underpinned by ESCO Synergy Artificial Intelligence that helps companies extract information from the documents they receive, as well as automate a number of manual processes such as coding invoices or matching invoices and providing predictive analytics. ASCA is a platform, according to the Gartner Magic Quadrant, a research organization that looks into areas such as ability to execute, research and development, as well as customer feedback. And ASCA is the only platform that is a leader in Gartner Quadrant for both accounts payables and accounts receivables applications. So accounts payables applications covers AP automation and e-invoicing, and you can see that quadrant on your left. And then on the right is accounts receivables, and this area covers collections, payment allocation, invoice delivery, and credit management. So ASCA, as I say, the only platform that features in both of these Gartner quadrants. Now, we ran this event live in Wellington about a month ago, and what we realized is we also needed to cover a little bit more about PEPPOL e-invoicing, what PEPPOL is. So we've included a couple of slides to cover and give you a bit of an introduction of what PEPPOL is. But if you have more questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button to ask some questions, both from me as well as our panel today. So PEPPOL stands for Pan-European Public Procurement Online Standard for e-invoicing. This is a standard that is adopted by more than 60 countries globally, and it's very it's a mature, very well adopted standard that New Zealand has adopted since 2019. And in New Zealand, it's governed by MB, Ministry of Business and Innovation, as I say, since 2019. ASCA has been a certified access point for PEPPOL in New Zealand since June 2020 in New Zealand, and in Australia since April 2020. But ASCA has been doing e-invoicing processing in other countries from about 2016, 2017. Now, looking at the PEPPOL, what we wanted to highlight is the four-corner model that is implemented and governed by MB in New Zealand. So in the four-corner model, you've got a sender, which is, in case of accounts payables, your customers that are sending invoices to the access point sender. And these invoices are being translated and delivered to the right address, being receiver's address, by the access point receiver, and they arrive automatically to the to you as a to you from your supplier. Sorry, the PEPPOL access point does the translation, but the standard invoicing means that your senders and receivers can just configure one process, one standard, and then exchange that without having to change standard for every customer or every supplier. That's the rules of PEPPOL, and ASCA is the certified access point for both the sender and the receiver, meaning that you can send invoices electronically with ASCA and you can receive invoices electronically with ASCA using the PEPPOL standard. Now, in November last year, MB had announced the implementation of the requirement for most government agencies to be able to receive e-invoicing and process invoices from suppliers within 5 days, and that is coming into effect from the 1st of January 2026. So what I wanted to highlight today is that PEPPOL is one of the elements that companies need to enable faster invoice processing, but there are a number of other elements that companies need to remember about as they process invoices that can also generate delays and impact how quickly you can process your supplier invoices. So if you look at the slide, we have the step number 1, which is always invoice capture. For New Zealand, in the last 10 to 20 years, the most common way of receiving invoices from suppliers has been in PDF, and there are many tools, including ASCA, that enable you to process PDF invoices automatically, similar to the way you would process an e-invoice via PEPPOL or any other EDI format. We don't see many paper invoices, but over the last some other countries still process a lot of paper invoices, and we still see some paper invoices circulating in New Zealand. So when you implement the PEPPOL e-invoicing at this first step of invoice capture, you remove the need to key in invoices manually from a PDF or paper. However, what's worth to remember is that if you're processing invoices with purchase orders, you still need to three-way match invoices, and you still need to validate the data that is coming to you from your suppliers. PEPPOL makes sure that the invoices you receive, there are no mistakes of the rekeying type, but your suppliers can still provide a purchase order that is incorrect, or the data on the invoice that is incorrect. So this is where validation come in place, and you still need to have robust systems to be able to validate against the purchase order and goods receipt and the data that is on that invoice. You also need to be able to handle exceptions. What happens if the purchase order is incorrect or there is a price or quantity mismatch? And you need to be able, in most cases, to cater for approval of exceptions, or also invoices that come without purchase orders that would require still multi-level approval, coding and review before they can be transferred for payment. So all of these steps contribute to potential delays. And when you consider automating invoice processing, you need to consider not just the ingestion method, but also how you're going to process invoices through all the steps required to pay your supplier, and what is the potential there for the automation and removal of manual steps and delays at each of these steps. So with this, I'll wrap up the introduction and we will start the panel discussion with Mel and Lindsay. So first of all, let me introduce Lindsay. Lindsay Horton, he's Manager of Finance Systems at Kāinga and has been working in finance for over 30 years. He has a strong track record in strategy and transformation and passionate about optimizing finance operations for technology and efficiency. Lindsay led implementation of ASCA, including e-invoicing with Oracle e-business suite in 2018, and he continues to work on digital initiatives and improvement projects, including Oracle EPM cloud adoption. As I mentioned, Kāinga has been using ASCA for a few years. We implemented the project in 2018, so a reasonably good amount of time to gain efficiencies and get the most out of the system. So some of the efficiencies that Kāinga received from implementing ASCA is reduced AP resourcing time, auto processing of PO invoices, improved exception handling, and full visibility into the invoice status, as well as improved duplicate detection. ASCA has provided machine learning to automate processing not just of e-invoices, but also of the PDF invoices that are arriving and previously would have been keyed manually. And also ASCA provided ability for Kāinga to process e-invoices using PEPPOL network. So Kāinga is ready for that requirement as of 1st of January next year. Our second panelist is Mel Patrimonio. She's a Group Manager for Transaction Services at Health New Zealand Te Whatu Ora. Mel started working in the health industry in 2009 as a Receivables Manager for Health Alliance, and then her role expanded to include payables responsibilities. She is currently working on a proposal to amalgamate the former District Health Board's Transaction Services teams to a national team, and Mel previously worked with Philips NZ Waste Management and Ford Motor Company. Health New Zealand implemented ASCA only recently. In fact, some of the hospitals only went live earlier this year, but they already have some efficiency gains, automating data extraction, invoice matching, and reconciliation, and they significantly reduced manual data entry errors, in particular on the larger multi-line invoices. Supplier communications have improved with better tracking tools for supplier communication. ASCA have enabled AI learning and machine learning for invoices that come in mostly via PDF, and then ASCA also provides for scalability to add volume and hospitals as required. So two very different implementations from a point of view that Kāinga has been using ASCA for a few years, and then Health New Zealand is a very recent implementation. So as we put together our panel questions, what we tried to do is direct them the most recent implementation questions to Mel, because that experience is very fresh, and some of the results questions to Lindsay, because they've had a bit more time to get use out of the system. So with that, I will start with our first question. And our first question will be to both Mel and Lindsay, but we'll go to Lindsay first. And it is reflecting on your journey. What is the biggest challenges your organization faced during the transition to accounts payables automation, and how did you overcome this, Lindsay?
Thanks a lot. Morning, everybody. it says that was a good intro. We've got quite a track record working with PESCA and AP Automation. So over that Oracle e-business suite on-premise application, we implemented that in 2012, and way back in 2018. The biggest thing that we wanted to do was to progress the automation journey. And the key challenge for me really was just getting started. So the big thing was to identify the benefits that were available from automation, and to basically get my sponsors on side, the business engaged in the conversation, so that we could actually see and realize and show what the benefits were of automating the AP side of things, because we were processing a lot of invoices manually, and we had a lot of things that weren't optimized. So 80,000 invoices coming from a diverse range of suppliers. So it was really the benefits were quite easy to map out, and to make the case for change was the challenge in terms of getting the investment allocated to the project to get started. So that whole piece of doing the stakeholder engagement with the manager of finance shared services, the CFO, and the enterprise architect. Once we got that alliance going, then that was good, because my financial system strategy had been around for a wee while, and we had top of the list on the roadmap was to commence the AP automation journey. So that sort of got that going, and once we got the stakeholders behind us, where we were away, we could get the ball rolling. So I think the other element that was really challenging was getting the business ready. We had a finance shared services entity already set up, so we were pretty well positioned in the corporate office to go. They were change ready, and they'd been suffering for a long time under the volumes of the invoices, so they were pretty good. I guess the problem was probably more out in the business. We had 300 requisitioners out around New Zealand that were creating purchase orders and managing the interaction with the suppliers. So getting them on site and implementing some really good process around our accounts payable was absolutely critical. And a couple of things we did there to get that going. So we had a user group. We engaged with a big portion of those 300, and we also made sure that the business process was really clear. So we needed a purchase order for every transaction, and we hadn't been too good at issuing those. We had a lot of retrospective purchase orders. So we implemented a no PO, no go policy, and we put in some monitoring reporting. So every month you could see the business units that were actually raising the POs late, and that was being escalated up and reporting at our senior management level. So it affected a really good implementation of the policy of making sure there's a PO there. Because if the invoice comes in, no matter what system you have, if you haven't got a PO to match to it, then it's not going to go anywhere. And I think the other thing was that the automation is one thing, but then getting the invoice out to the business and going through that process of validating that it's good to pay, and getting the business to do the receipting is a big piece. So again, we had an education program with those 300 requisitioners that were doing the receipting, and we were monitoring how fast they were individually at doing the receipting, and encouraging them to do it within a day. So that implementation of the policy and the business process was pretty significant thing to get right up front, and that's how we address those challenges.
Thank you very much. And I think as we implement the project, and just going over the next couple of years, as the quality of the master data, the purchase order data, and the processes improved with the monitoring, we could definitely see the results improving over time as well. So I think, probably to sum up, part of it is always technology, but a huge part of it is the process and your people, and how they work with documents. So I think, Mel, from your side, what are the most significant challenges for Health New Zealand and Te Whatu Ora during the transition? Probably still ongoing.
Yeah, it is still ongoing. Hello, everyone. I think that Lindsay already talked about the change management and the mind shift of people. When you cannot underestimate when you change from a manual process to something that's automated, where people don't actually see what's in front of them, they can't actually enter. And so shifting from that mindset is quite a challenge. For Health New Zealand, I think that everyone is aware of the challenges that we have faced in the last 2 years. And so we're trying to implement this invoice automation within accounts payable against a backdrop of what is happening within Health New Zealand, within changes in the from a board to a commissioner, changes in our ELT and our SLT, which also meant changes in the direction of a structure. And even now, we're still trying to um, form a structure nationally, because at the moment we're still operating as 20 district health boards, sort of. We're trying to come together as one. So trying to implement a national automation is very challenging, because we have 20 different policies, 20 different ways of working, 20 different bank accounts, and you have all of these we try to come to a standard way of working, and trying to find what are the business requirements that you have in the beginning. When you set up your project, what are the business requirements that you have to have in order to fulfill the needs, when sometimes from me working from a northern region, initially, and trying to have a view or a perspective of what the whole nation would need was the biggest challenge in this project. Because initially, when we started with um, when we started dealing with Fujifilm, we were really thinking only of the northern region. But that, with the change in Health New Zealand becoming into one, that just blew up into this whole big national project. So that was, for us, that was the biggest challenge, was trying to say northern region only processes about 60,000 invoices a month, but now with the whole nation, we were talking about 150,000 invoices a month that we need to process. So that's a big shift in mid project. So that was the biggest challenge. And for how do you get over that, is we had to try and find a common way. You had to find common ground to say, this is these are the deal breakers. These are the things that we cannot disagree on. PO first, for example, that's a big one. And there may be some other ways that you do differently, because your setup is different, your supply chain is structured differently, but you have to find the common ground in order for you to have some sort of common standard by which you could all follow.
I think that's a really good background and perspective into, I think, the amount of change and the complexity that your team had to deal with. And it may seem, I think, for the people on the call, that this certainly applies to the larger government entities, and in the commercial space this doesn't happen. But it's quite interesting. We ran a similar lunch and learn event last week in Auckland, and we had a speaker from Rich's Transport Group who's given a lot of insight into their journey. But one of the lessons that really resonated with me was to try and find the common ground and automate for 90% or 80% of the cases, not focus on everything. And that advice is probably the one that we see as the most useful insight anyone could, or rather the mindset that you could have when you start the project. And it doesn't matter what your company size is, or how many invoices you process, focusing on that common ground is very important. Picking the 80% that will give you the most benefit, and then improving over time, I think, is probably how you eat the elephant one bit at a time, rather than trying to solve everyone's problem at the same time. I think if we tried to do that, we would still be delivering that project for Health New Zealand. So with that, we'll go to our second question. And that is for Lindsay to begin with. Since implementing invoice automation, what are the measurable improvements have you seen in efficiency, compliance, and overall financial operations?
Thanks, Irene. Yeah, look, I think it's been significant for us. Previously, before automation, we would really suffer in terms of managing the peak flows of the 20th of the month or the end of the month, where you get a lot of invoices coming in, and we wouldn't be able to get them processed in a timely fashion, and that backlog would carry over for quite some time before the team could get on top of it, and a lot of overtime, a lot of weekend work. But now we've got that ability to scale, and pretty much when the invoice comes in, assuming it's got those base components on it of the purchase order, and the quality is good, then we're processing about 70% of those same day. So when I say processing, I don't mean paid, but we're getting them in, we're matching them to the purchase order, and then we're getting them out to the business to review and validate and receipt the PO. So the bit that our central team is doing is very much a lot better managed, and the big thing that they really benefit from is that they can follow up on errant invoices a lot easier. So the customer service they can provide to the supplier to show them where their invoice is at is so much better, because they know exactly where those invoices are at, because the tool gives us the visibility over exactly where in the process the invoice has got to. So, I think that's a big thing. We're resolving problematic invoices in a lot more structured manner. We're putting them into queues, and we've got people dedicated to following up those queues and addressing them. So, as a combination of all those things, we've got a platform where we can actually focus on enhancing and improving the time to pay. So we're getting about 20% of our invoices paid the same day. We're using a little bit of magic to do that. So if they're low value, then we will auto receipt them for the business, because the business often incurs maybe anywhere between 1 and 5 days delay in terms of getting to receipt them. So if it's low value, low risk, then we'll go through that process, and we get the invoices out the door the same day in many cases. So yeah, it really gives us the platform to be able to refine our processes and really tweak them and get really good efficient gains out of it.
Wow. So 20% of your invoices paid on the same day. That's pretty remarkable for your suppliers.
Yes, yeah, I know they love it.
That's
raises the expectation for those that don't get it the same day, though, Irene.
yeah, makes sense. Yep, no, very good. And Mel, from your perspective, obviously still early days, but what are the measurable improvements that you can see comparing to the old manual ways?
I think one of the things that we always struggled with was if we pay the incorrect supplier. So with with ESCA and its ability to check the invoice against the PO and against our master data, early on you can actually check straight away whether this is not the right purchase order that was raised against the supplier. So you can check, you can minimize paying the incorrect supplier. We also a good benefit was also to check whether that business has got the right GST. You can check the GST in the bank account. Is this a correct supplier? So in terms of validating all that has really helped us quite so much. Visibility of invoices being processed in terms of it's all in there. You can see where they are instead of being in someone else's desk or in someone's table. It's all in there. You can track your invoices. So that's a big gain for us. And so in terms of processing time, it's become faster. And attaching a document, which is important for us, attaching the PDF document against the invoice entry in our financial system, that has made the time to do that so much quicker. We don't even have to do that because it's just part of the posting process in ESCA. And I think the other benefit is about reporting. Although reporting for now is still a bit early for us, but we can already see the benefits of the reports that are available in ESCA in terms of which suppliers should be focused on, which areas or what fields are always being in error. So you can see that from the reporting, and so you can have a targeted approach in terms of which areas you need to improve on.
Makes sense. Thank you very much. So our third question is a long one. So we'll start with Mel. Just following on from your recent experience, what do you think are the critical success factors for implementing successful accounts payable automation project? And a follow-up from that is, what advice would you give to organizations, particularly in engaging stakeholders in preparing for the change?
I think if you have to start a project, you have to be very clear about your business requirements. You have to spend so much time, a lot of time actually in gathering that. Do not underestimate that. And so in order to do that, you have to have your SMEs in the project, involved in the project at the outset, because they're the ones who will know the nitty-gritty stuff that, that can get forgotten or can get ignored, not ignored, but not taken into account. So that to me is very important. And then when you have those requirements, you have to have a very robust and exhaustive RFP process. You have to make sure that you have to be critical about every supplier that presents their solution, and you have to make sure that it's a match for what you want, because otherwise, if they cannot realistically meet your needs, then it's a no-go. The other thing that I learned was in the beginning was you have to have a full and comprehensive training of your end users. I know that the common way to do it now when you have a project is to train the trainer, but sometimes I've found that that was not initially that could work, but you really have to have retraining. If you have a train the trainer, you have to have retraining and retraining, because a lot of the knowledge and the data gets sometimes missed as you go from train the trainer to the trainer to the trainer. So those are the key things for me.
And it's great. And I think involvement, probably highlight from me, involving the SMEs very early in the project is probably the most critical part of the project and the success. Making sure that they cross the requirements as you gather the requirements, but also they cross the testing and training is really something that makes a difference for the success of the project, and how, what the result that you're getting from day one as opposed to over the years. So no, thank you for that, Mel. That's very good. Going to, I think this time we'll go to Lindsay first. How did ASCA contribute to streamlining your invoice processes, and were there surprising results along the way?
Yeah, I think ASCA contributed a lot to streamlining our processes. I think the big thing is it's that tool that provides visibility over the end-to-end process, and it's that one source of the truth. It gives us confidence that we're getting the invoices in via one channel, and we can use its reporting to find the activity that's going on for a particular supplier. And it really enables us to break down the process into its components and to measure the performance of each parts of those steps, and then to reach out to where they're not going as well as what they could be. Often it's to do with people, and it's often to do with people in the business. So, we can use the tool to analyze what's going on and to tweak it and get the performance benefits out of the pieces that are non-optimized. So, some of the examples using the reports that come out of the box that I've experienced is that, as for the central team that are managing the invoices initially, we could get the performance stats of the individuals that were actually working with the invoices, and sort of map the number of invoices they were processing individually across a period of a week or a month. And some real high performers come out and they were just head and shoulders above the rest. And what we did with that was we sort of sat down with them and said, well, what are you doing differently to everybody else? Why are you able to process so many more invoices than the others? And they were able to sort of share their techniques, in terms of how they were utilizing the system to really move things through quickly. So, and the other example that we had was the CFO was very keen on, how we're saying we did 20% of invoices same day. He was pretty keen to get that up higher than 20%. So he tasked us with maximizing that. So we started an initiative around paying the same day. And it was really the ability to use ASCA's tools to analyze what was going on there that we could actually tweak it, and we could influence where we could make changes that really would speed up the process. So yeah, it just opens up the world of invoice processing from rather than being a bit of a black box where you're not quite sure what's going on, and you just hope at the end of the day, eventually the invoice will go through that full process and the money will go out the door, to being a tool that provides you visibility on exactly where things are at, and allows you to manage the end-to-end process way better than what we were ever able to do before.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And Mel, from your perspective, were there surprises along the way, things that you gained with Eska that you didn't expect?
I think the features that in ESCA, like for example, providing direct feedback to the supplier within ESCA. So you have things that you want to take up with the supplier, things that you want to say to the supplier, things that are wrong with the invoice. So this direct email, and it's contained within ESCA, and you can track that and the history of it. So that is a really good tool for us, because we can tell them, hey, you have no PO, please send it back to us with the PO, and things like that. You can also CC your internal end user, or you can send an email to various parties. The history and tracking of the invoice within as it progresses through is also a really good tool, because you would know straight away if someone asks, where's my invoice? You can say, oh, it's over here. So it's there. You don't have to look at any other email, or troll through thousands, hundreds of emails where that is. Internal conversation is a feature in ESCO, which we find very useful, because this is amongst end users, and because we have about 60 ESCA users across the country, and trying to communicate to all those people is quite a challenge. So having that internal conversation where you can have a specific invoice and send a message to a specific person regarding that invoice has been a big help to us. Supply statement reconciliation has been also expedited, so that's really a good feature. And for us to correct the invoice before it goes into our financial system, before we post it, has been a big help, because otherwise it gets into our financial system and then we have to correct it there. Sometimes is harder to do than if you correct it in ESCA, when you can still see it.
Makes sense. No, that's great. And I think most companies we work with, regardless of whether that's a government or commercial organization, there is obviously always a need for a business case. So we inevitably help with some data to put together into a business case for what return on investment you can expect from putting in accounts payables automation tools in place. And I think in most cases, these generally center around the improvements you get in keying data or processing faster or auto posting. And that's how often I think companies look at the process of automating invoices is really all about the automation aspect of it, the straight through processing, the matching. And I think what we often don't think about when we put together a business case is that visibility that both Lindsay and Mel are talking about, that normally is not something you can easily measure, so it doesn't end up as a main benefit. But most companies we talk to post implementation, one of the biggest benefits is in that visibility of where exactly the invoices are, and then ability to communicate better with suppliers, again providing the visibility into the status of the invoice, the issues with the invoice. That visibility makes it a much smoother process for both the company that is processing invoices, but also for suppliers, because they know exactly what they need to do, and it's much easier for them to resolve issues and improve their processes, so you can process their invoices better. So that's probably a comment and observation from us on those insights. And Lindsay, for you, next one is how do you see invoice automation evolving in the next 3 years, and what new technologies and trends should organizations be ready to embrace, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think this one for me is sort of if we focus on the core activity, then what we really want to see is a maximization of the use of the e-invoicing channel. The history of emailing the invoice, the PDF, and then scanning it, and all the inherent problems of interpreting the data on the invoice, and getting the data into your financial system is still a little problematic. And what I think is that if you can remove that and go to e-invoicing, and you've got those formats standardized, and your suppliers are able to transact using that standardized format, then you know what you're getting, and you can process that invoice with a lot more certainty that it's come from a legitimate supplier, and that the data that you're getting is what you need to be able to satisfy yourself that that's an invoice that you should pay. So I think the maximization of the PEPPOL network and the e-invoicing piece is where we need to go. And I think that facilitates the two-way visibility of what's happening with the invoice as well, because I think the supplier wants to know that you've received the invoice and it's in the process of being paid. And so using that electronic business-to-business channel where you can actually send back confirmation to the supplier of either you've paid it or it's in the process of paying it, I think two-way communication is really, really valuable. And for us, the issuing of the PO to the supplier electronically would be hugely valuable as well, because then you can evolve the whole process of making sure that the invoice that you are receiving is actually relevant to the purchase order that you've issued, and that will remove a lot of anomalies. And save a hell of a lot of work. So I think that combined with the tools that are available now and the artificial intelligence just to check against your master data, just to ensure that you're dealing with a legitimate invoice, and you're paying your suppliers correctly to the correct bank account, and you're having that ability to have the tools learn and make you aware of where things don't perhaps look right. It's the artificial intelligence embracing that, and maximizing the use of that, I think, is where we'll be headed.
Yeah, and there is a lot of developments in AI happening, including in ESCO. That's probably an area to watch out. And the last question before we move to the live Q&A is, how has adopting e-invoicing impacted your organization's invoice processing and the main hurdles associated with e-invoicing? Linz, this one is for you, as you've implemented that a wee while ago.
Yeah, I think the big thing is it just gives us certainty in terms of the upfront processing. So it allows us to get the invoice in and process it the same day in just about all cases. It can't come through without a PO on it. That's a requirement. So that's often we're rejecting a lot of invoices when they're sent via email and PDF. So the error rate on e-invoices is very, very low, and it sort of takes out that whole OCR scanning idiosyncrasy from the equation. So, I think that's the best thing about it. I think the hurdle really is just trying to get our suppliers to adopt it. So it's quite easy to do for most suppliers, but the rationale for change is sometimes not easy to communicate to them. So I think the biggest hurdle is having really good communication with your suppliers and being proactive and going out to them and saying, hey, we would like you to issue your invoices via an e-invoice as opposed to an email PDF going forward. So it's for us, that's probably our next steps, because we've got about 2,000 suppliers. So it's picking the ones that we know that are actually transacting in e-invoicing ready type systems like Xero or MYOB, contacting them and saying, hey, here's a little how-to guide of how you can change your invoice to be sent as an e-invoice, and so that we up the numbers, because at the moment our numbers are quite small, but there's big benefits in there for us to get more of our suppliers on board.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, definitely. And Mel, anything you'd like to add to the last question?
No, we're still in the process of
implementing it, yeah.
doing the invoicing, yeah.
Put one underway. All right. So with that, we're just on time, and we will start with the live Q&A. So one of the questions we have is, how quickly does it integrate with your accounting ERP system once the invoice has been approved? I think that's as I understand it, it relates to transfer of the invoice from ESCA to your Oracle system, because both organizations use Oracle.
Is that
Go step in there. Look, we've got it set up so that it integrates on an hourly basis. So as long as the invoice is matched to the PO and is validated, then it'll be picked up and interfaced into our Oracle system on the hour, and then it starts the process of Oracle workflows it to our requisitioners for receipting, review and receipting. But yeah, it's a very small delay from our perspective.
for health, mainly because of the volume of invoices that we process, it's not as quick. I would want it to be quicker, but ours takes an overnight validation because of just the timing of all the invoices.
The next question is, what is the policy and procedures do you have to handle new suppliers, and how do you encourage business not to engage brand new suppliers all the time? Mel, you're smiling. Do you want to take this one?
Well, that's a continuing challenge, I think, for us, and that's actually a point of realistically. I mean, yesterday we had a meeting about that. Is how do you actually stop that? And we don't have there's no quick answer to that, I don't think, but you just have to have really clear guidelines in terms of why and when, and also have agree on who needs to approve and as overall view of whether or not you need a new supplier.
Makes sense. Yeah. Lindsay, from your side, is that a challenge for Kāinga?
Yeah, I think it certainly is. Again, it's about that education piece for us, and we sort of partner with our procurement team. And so if anybody wants a new supplier, then they raise a request, and that gets workflowed through to our team and then onto our procurement team, and it goes through a number of vetting checks to ensure that it's appropriate to engage a new supplier. Of course, it doesn't stop somebody going and doing it remotely without that engagement, but it means that the procurement team can then be aware of the new supplier and go back to the individuals and say, well, look, if you haven't gone through the process correctly, then this is going to be a one-off engagement, and future engagements will need to go through the process correctly. So yeah, it's not quite eliminating the instances of new suppliers or rogue new suppliers being created up front, but it creates a little bit of governance around it, which means that it can be addressed in fairly short order.
Makes sense. And of course, ESCA can help you with that process as well, depending on where you are with onboarding suppliers. The next question we have is for both Mel and Lindsay. Can you give us an indication of volume, please? Keen to understand what volume is large enough to mean it needs to be integrated overnight rather than hourly. I think Mel was saying 100,000 is what we're processing about at the moment per month.
Yeah,
increasing to 150,000. So yeah, I think that it's a very large volume for most businesses in New Zealand. I guess to give you an indication, some of our customers process 1,000 invoices, and then on the 100,000 invoices per month is definitely at the top end of the volume we see in New Zealand. And Lindsay, for housing in New Zealand, that's about 10,000 per month, I think.
Yes, yeah, we're doing between 80 to maybe 120,000 a year, probably just subsiding a little bit at the moment. But I think it was really the numbers were one thing, but it was really the decision on how quickly we wanted to pay. So those subsequent processes of getting the invoice into our ERP, Oracle, getting the invoice validated in there and sent out to our requisitioners, and getting that receipting time frame down to be as short as possible, so we could then get the money out the door. So that time to pay was the consideration. We wanted to shorten it, so we decided to interface ESCA and Oracle on an hourly basis. And if there's a little bit of cost and overhead to that, but it's really just scheduling and being organised. So volumes probably weren't the key consideration of the the timing of the interface to financials. It was more the time to pay and trying to maximize or minimize the time to pay was our driver.
And look, I think just to add to that question, in most cases, it really comes down to the ERP system that is being integrated, because for some ERPs, pretty much live transfer is possible. For other ERPs, it's a slightly different approach. So it always comes back to the individual use case and the ERP that is being used. So we've got the next question, which is e-invoicing a featured trend for non-government businesses? I think only. I don't know if Lindsay and Mel, if you want to tackle this one.
The requirement, you mean?
Yeah, and I think it's probably asking if it applies only to government agencies. I think there's a drive
under the government procurement rules. Rule 51. So yeah.
So MB is trying to drive the adoption of e-invoicing, and it's starting with the government agencies and requiring the government agencies to be able to receive invoices. But most government agencies transact with non-government agencies. So obviously the requirement to send e-invoicing and adoption of e-invoicing very much relies on the commercial businesses adopting e-invoicing, because without that adoption, it's the e-invoicing is not going to gain traction in New Zealand. It is a very slow journey. So as of last month, about 40,000 invoices have been processed through the entire PEPPOL e-invoicing network in New Zealand. So if you think across all the government agencies and all businesses, 40,000 is still a very low volume. I don't know what it is as a percentage of all invoices processed in New Zealand, but it is very tiny. So that, to drive that adoption forward, it really does rely on smaller businesses starting that with, and in particular, if they're using Xero, it's a much easier approach than running a larger ERP system. So yeah, there is definitely reliance on the commercial businesses adopting e-invoicing as well. And then the next question is interesting on information invoicing. We haven't adopted that approach yet. Just to confirm, e-invoicing only works as long as there is a purchase order. I can probably quickly answer that. No, it doesn't have to have a purchase order. It can work with non-PO invoices. It really is just getting that information faster, but then it still needs you to code that invoice, even though it arrived via PEPPOL network. It still needs to be coded, it still needs to be approved, so then it follows the same process it would do if it arrived via a PDF. It's just you're not keying it or extracting PDF information. And then we have the next question, which is having NZBN a mandatory requirement for using e-invoicing in New Zealand? I'm actually not 100% sure if it's a mandatory requirement. I think I might need to come back to you on that one. I think I have a sneaking suspicion. Yes, you do. I just don't know if it's mandatory.
Hi, it's Lisa. Excuse me, it's Lisa.
Yes,
from
there you go.
here.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi.
Yes.
How are you?
Very good. Glad to have you on the call.
The NZBN isn't in its own right mandatory, but for e-invoicing it is your primary identifier. So
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is necessary to have an NZBN to use e-invoicing.
There you go, John. We don't have to come back to you. Lisa came to save that question. Thank you.
Can I also just say, with respect to the businesses taking up e-invoicing, there is some consultation going on at the moment with respect to large businesses having to send e-invoices to government to go with the already mandate of government agencies having to send and receive.
Makes sense.
It's not there yet, but it is in consultation.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Okay, we've got the next question. Thank you, Lisa. As part of Go Live, did you have order posts turned on for all vendors, or was it as a phased approach? If all, have you had any issues with incorrect fields? Sorry, just being scraped, or has it been a smooth process? Yeah, Lindsay or Mel, I think probably applies to either of you.
Well, for us, it definitely hasn't been a smooth process, so we did not switch it on automatically in the first. We actually identified specific suppliers to see whether the invoices that would go through are okay, and then we turn on auto posting by supplier. After a few weeks, we did have some comfort to say we will switch on auto posting for this operating unit, but then we found out that there were a lot of things that came through that were incorrect, as you say, that fields that were not matched. So we gradually switched off some auto posting for some supplies that were not matching correctly. So it is a sort of a combination, and you have to keep an eye on what's going through. It's not a done deal to say auto posting switched on.
And Lindsay,
I'd endorse that too, Mel. That was our experience as well. So we needed to analyse our supplier base to identify those ones that were invoicing us in a consistent manner and with high volumes, that we had high accuracy in terms of, especially when it's a PDF scanned invoice, that it was actually interpreting the invoice with high accuracy. So we did the phased approach, definitely.
Yeah. And that's what we typically would recommend to customers, is do a phased approach. ASCA has a lot of reporting which suggests to you which suppliers are ready for auto posting based on the accuracy of information they provide. And there are a lot of rules you can turn on to ensure that the auto posting only happens when all your requirements are matched. But yeah, it's not something you just turn on and hope for the best. You do, in the first 3 months, I think there's a lot of data collection around the suppliers and readiness of suppliers to turn on auto posting, and then you gradually start to turn on auto posting for your suppliers and increase that over time. That would be the approach we'd recommend to take. Okay, we just got a couple of more questions. One is, how will you be reporting to MB every quarter once the obligations kick in? That's probably to Lindsay on e-invoicing.
Just really leveraging the dashboards that we have out of ESCA. Very easy to track the time to pay of invoices that have come through that channel. So we've enhanced it perhaps a little bit with some extracts from ESCA and putting it into Power BI dashboard to make it so we can build up history over time, a little bit enhancement on what's available within ESCA. But yeah, it's just pretty straightforward. It's not challenging us too much at all there, because of all that history that we've had of analysing the performance of the end-to-end process. So e-invoicing is just a subset of that. So we have built up that capability over time, but majority of that is serviced by dashboards out of ESCA.
Makes sense. Great. And I think the last one for you, Lindsay, is, has PEPPOL helped you approve payments faster?
Yeah, I think it does. It's that whole upfront certainty around the data that you're getting, and taking away that idiosyncrasy of the scanning process of the PDF document. So it gets that bit so that the same day we can pretty much guarantee a PEPPOL invoice comes in same day, probably goes out to the business same day, and then it's just the idiosyncrasy of how long they need to take to validate that that invoice is good to pay and get the receipt in the system. Then the three-way matching is completed, and then the money can go out the door. So yeah, I think it will create some consistency and remove vagrancies. You know, if you look back at the old days when it was paper invoice, well, nobody wants to go back there. Now it's all email and PDF. I think in future, surely it's going to be a majority of it will be e-invoicing, and that's because it just makes such good sense and removes so many anomalies from the process.
Definitely. Very good. And with that, we'll close the live Q&A, and we've got the last question for both Lindsay and Mel, just really to finish off the session, is, if you could go back and start your automation journey again, what one thing you'd approach differently and why? Mel, do you want to start on this one?
I think the one thing that I would have wanted to do more of is the testing. You cannot underestimate how much time you should need to spend on testing on all the scenarios. You might find it very pedantic, very, very painful process, but you have to check every single scenario to see whether it will work or not.
It's good testing. There you go, Lindsay. And from your side, anything you'd do differently?
Yeah, I think just from the business side, stay close to it. Like we did all the hard work to get it going, and we teamed up with ESCA and then our IT guys set up the project, and we perhaps were a little bit hands-off, maybe through the late development stage and early testing stage. And our system testers did a great job, but they didn't have the knowledge of the end-to-end process that our business SMEs had. So we should have put our SMEs into the end of the testing process, or into the testing process a little bit sooner. So waiting to UAT was a mistake for us, because we found a few bugs, and they took a bit of rework to re-engineer the process. So yeah, keeping your business close to the whole implementation is really, really important, I think.
I completely agree, and I think that's probably my wrap up actually for everyone is in particular in larger organizations, accounts payables automation projects are often treated as IT projects. They're not, they're your finance projects. And as much as your IT are very knowledgeable people, they often do not know how you process invoices. And it's incredibly important that the business is involved in key phases like testing in particular, because that's where, you know, and when I say testing, I don't mean the testing of development, I mean the user acceptance testing, but processing the sample invoices, making sure that the system behaves as you would expect it to behave, or finding some things that are unusual, that's the moment to do it. And it's really, really important that your finance team stays close and stays engaged and make sure that what they get is what they actually need. So it's your business-led project rather than IT-led project. To say as much as involvement of IT is very important, that's critical. So I think, look, thank you very much for both Lindsay and Mel. I think that was very insightful for everyone on the call. I've got a question from Cass. Ah, there you go. That was a wrong emoji, I think. Thank you, guys. And, you know, I'll just, on the last slide, I'll just quickly remind you of the invoice journey, and remembering that all the other parts of invoice process, as well as PEPPOL, are important to process invoices without delay. And just the last slide from us, thank you for attending. We'd love to run more of these webinars, and we'd like to make sure that we're meeting the mark and we're improving every time. So we really would appreciate your feedback. If you could scan the QR code and tell us how we've done, and if there is anything we can improve, that would be really appreciated. I'll leave this for a few more minutes, and thank you very much for joining the call.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks
Thank
all.
you. Thank you, team.